Okay, we're live.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's Wikimedia Tech Talk. Ouch, I have an OUI using OOUI without pain. Our presenter today is Muriel Schottlaender, a senior software engineer on the contributors team. I'm your host, Sarah. I'm a technical writer and developer advocacy. We will have a YouTube stream, which is noted here. And afterwards, the talk is going to be about 45 minutes long. And then afterwards, we'll have a Q&A period. You can ask questions on the YouTube stream. You can also ask questions through IRC, through the Wikimedia Office channel. And we'll put this slide up again at the very end so that folks will be able to see that. And as always, this Tech Talks are open for anyone in the technical contributor community at Wikimedia. So if you have questions, if you would like to submit a talk yourself or a topic for a talk, please check out this link that's here at the bottom. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Muriel. Muriel, you're up.
All right. I'm sorry, we're dealing with a small issue. All right. I'm going to start with a different microphone. All right. So hello, everybody. I hope you can see this. And welcome to Ouch, I have an OOUI using OOUI without pain. I'm hoping that at the end of this lecture, not only will you be using OOUI without pain, but you're going to love it. And everybody's going to love using OOUI. So that's my plan. I will be doing something that many presenters fear doing, and so do I a little bit. And I will use a live demo. So I'm hoping that everybody will be patient with that and nothing will crash. But as we all know, when you use live demo, things happen. So we're going to do in this lecture, we're going to cover a little bit very quickly what is OOUI and a little of the history. And then we're going to go over basic usage, some pitfalls, advanced usage, and resources. And the focus of this lecture is going to be hands-on demos. So hopefully that'll help out. So without further ado, what is OOUI? Let's talk a little bit about the history. So before Visual Editor, everything was PHP. Thank you. Everything was PHP, and we had JavaScript as augment, right? Like we used jQuery UI, we used router JavaScript. It all, was augmenting things that were the Node.js experience. And for the most part, Wikimedia used to work on one big UI product at a time. Like we didn't do a lot of products at once. We did pretty much every year one big product at a time, which allowed us a little bit, to adjust our strategies every time, right? Like we used one big product and then we learned from it. We used the next big product, we learned from it, and we changed a little bit. All right. Okay. And we changed a little bit the way that we, each time works. But then the first rich client application came in, Visual Editor, that really was a full-blown JavaScript application, no longer something that just augments stuff. And that required us to go and look at solutions, because the current solution, jQuery UI, the raw JavaScript, were not sufficient. So we looked into existing libraries at the time. Remember, this is around 2011, 2012. And we found that the libraries that existed back then either didn't have sufficient browser compatibility. You guys might remember IE6. We used to support it for a very long time, while everybody else didn't. But it wasn't just IE6. Like we have browsers that we support that other companies consider, out of industry for a while, and we needed to support those. And another big problem was that a lot of those libraries had barely any support for internationalization, and for us to add it in would be a huge chunk of work. So it was very clear that we needed pretty much a custom solution for Visual Editor, and that's where the thinking about that UI library started. But it began being inside Visual Editor. But then there started to be a little bit more demand for more JavaScript-based products, and we started working on more than one big thing at a time, and it began to be very clear that if we get this new visual editor UI, this new thing that we put a lot of time and effort to make it generic. And it's very powerful. If we get it out and let other products use it, we will gain a lot of UX and tech stack things. So it supports internationalization, supports older browsers. It goes by object-oriented principles. We want to make sure it unifies the UX principles across new interactive products. It's one place to make design decisions. So when designers decide that something no longer is valid and we need to change it, there's one place to do that, and all of the products using it gain from it. And of course, we get code consistency, and any update to the system, all of our products will gain from it. So it was decided that this is the direction we want to go in. And around 2013 is also when the front-end standards group started to form and started to talk about this with the technical committee. And there was very much an internal consensus that we need to get a better UX for our users, and this is a good way to achieve that. So from 2013 onwards, we started using OOUI for new products. And we were starting to talk about, which is just an ongoing project, to also get the older products like special pages and stuff like that to be updated into OOUI. This project is ongoing, although it's almost done. It's getting close to being pretty complete. So that's cool. So the next step, that was a little bit of history. Let's talk about the base principles of OOUI. I will run a little bit on this one, but the notes are available, and I will answer questions later. But this is kind of like where OOUI is coming from. This is the base principles that OOUI is based on, for better and worse. So the first thing we want to make sure is abstraction. A lot of times, especially back then, the data that you would use for JavaScript would be on the DOM element. So you'd have data attributes, you'd play around with them, you'd have like another DOM element that stores your attributes, and that caused a lot of a lot of problems, especially when we know that in our stack we have gadgets, and we can have multiple gadgets on a single DOM element or a single product, and putting everything in the trusting the DOM element to store our data is not very sustainable. On top of that, because we want to make sure that we support things that are not very trivial. So, for example, older browsers, making some polyfills, making sure that things, all the attributes are being read properly between browsers, all that kind of stuff. We wanted to make sure that we have these components, these widgets, that do that work for you. So you can say, I want an input, and whether IE reads that input attributes differently than Firefox, we would deal with that. You just get an input, and you put it in there, and you're done. So the abstraction layer was very, very important. And then in the abstraction layer, we have widgets, and then the widget has a dollar element that is the representation of the DOM, the jQuery representation of the DOM that you actually put in the DOM. So you have kind of like these abstraction layer that's very important. So things like, for example, set title. You might think that it's really, if you have a button and you say set, actually a button is set label. If you have a link and you have set title, so a title is just a title attribute, right? Well, not necessarily, because if you have an access key, you want to make sure that you're retaining it. And if you have accessibility concerns, there's a couple of things that we sometimes do to add to it. And you as the user of OOUI, you don't need to go and do a lot of research to make sure that a screen reader reads it properly, or that, what kind of title do I need to use for different kind of elements. You just use set title, and the system does it for you in cross-browser and multiple ways. And the same thing with set label. And things like that. You can give it string or internationalization or a jQuery object, and we kind of deal with what it means to add the actual DOM. The second thing is componentization, which is a hard word to say, and I can't believe I managed to say it. Which basically comes with the abstraction, right? The idea is that we want to make sure that things are components. We call them widgets. Everything is kind of like self-contained as much as possible. And that way you can take, it's kind of like a Lego, right? You have like this widget, this widget, this widget. You want to create something else, you just include them in. And this is a big principle of OOUI, for better and worse. Because for better, it means that it's very easy for you to build a very, very quick interface from scratch very quickly. You just take, I need 3 inputs, a button, boom, I'm done. The less good, which is something that we're dealing with and we're trying to solve right now, is that means that the structure of the DOM can be a little complicated because everything is nested. So we are aware of that, and we're trying to mitigate the CSS factors of that and stuff like that, but it is very powerful. when we are looking at things like we want to make sure that our gadget users can create these kind of things without a lot of trouble. Like they can just come in and say, I just need a button. Well, here you go, boom. You don't need to do anything else, right? And it manages the state for you, the events. It's synchronizing all of its internal widgets. It does all the calculation for you. If you want to add, if you have a button and you want to add an icon, all this consideration of whether or not we're moving the label and how much. And sometimes padding and margins are different in Firefox and Chrome, which can happen. All these things are done for you. We have a lot of that kind of calculation code. So that was kind of the point of making it very, very straightforward. The other principle is event-driven. I think I'm on number 4 right now. Event-driven, the entire library is based on events. And this is just an approach that we took that, there's multiple ways to do, especially nowadays. I think the bigger thing now is going with state, right, with Redux and all of that. Whatever exists, OOUI goes with events. That means that we can also do things like simplify the events for you. So this kind of relates to also the abstraction. Think about an input widget. And if you want to make sure that when someone types something in, you want to respond to a change event. Well, change event is not just a change event that is in the DOM. A change event can be a copy-paste. It can be, I just added a letter in. It can be, I marked something and dragged it over, which can happen. So it could be a whole bunch of things. We do that calculation for you. We translate those events from the DOM into cleaner events from the widget, where you can take the self-sustained widget and say, OK, just listen to change. I kind of don't care what you do in the background. I just know that when it changed, I'll listen to it. And that's how it works. And then when you create your own interface, and we will look at this in a minute, but when you create your own interface or your own widget, you can trust kind of to say, I want a button, listen to click, whether that click is in the DOM, a click, a mouse down, or a touch, because some cases cover other browsers or whatever, is irrelevant for the fact that you get a button that will respond anytime a user made a click intent. Right? So that is kind of like the event idea. Also, something that sometimes is missed and is very important, it's not just the idea that widgets emit events. A lot of widgets are also managing their own starting and stopping event listeners, which is very, very important when you have a lot of other kind of considerations going on in your page. So just a very quick example, when you have a pop-up, a lot of times OOUI would internally, turn the events listener on when the pop-up is toggled on, and then you can listen to whatever is inside it. But when you turn it off, it will turn off all the events so that we don't get, this noise event when the pop-up is unneeded, when the internal stuff, right? So we do all of that stuff for, the user. You don't really need, when you implement OOUI, you don't need to think about that at all. You just use it out of the box. And of course, something that's very important for us, and only recently seemed to have started to be a little important to other people, is supporting Node.js experience. We have a PHP stack, so it was important to us to work with that stack. And OOUI does that. We have OOUI widgets, and we have something called Infuse. The OOUI widgets also work with our HTML form. So you can add a widget to the HTML form, and most of our special pages actually auto-infuse. So you don't really need to do anything. And this is just a really simple way for us to say, here's the interface for a Node.js experience. It looks the same. It has the consistent behavior. And then I want to make sure that also those widgets behave the same way that they need to behave in JavaScript. Then I just infuse them in, and OOUI takes over. And OOUI will know how to take the same name, the same configuration options, and create that JavaScript widget that will be then in the DOM and will be dynamic. And lastly, of course, internationalization and accessibility. In fact, recently, I think we are completely compatible with the accessibility standard. That was awesome. And I18N is one of those things that the foundation and the movement really, really cares about, way beyond a lot of other places. So obviously, we wanted to make sure that the entire library gives that to users basically for free. Like, you don't need to even think about it. You create a widget or a gadget or a product. For the most part, you don't need to think about left to right, right to left, whatever. You create it, and the system will automatically know for you how to adjust itself. And for example, I have a little, the screenshot is a pop-up button widget. And we didn't need to specify anything. It's a button. It's a default button pop-up widget. So in left to right, it goes towards the left, and in right to left, automatically for you. You didn't need to do anything. It will go towards the right. And even our configuration option, so if you do want to kind of configure it and you want to control where it goes, the wording of the configuration option already kind of are set up for you to understand that it will automatically support right to left and stuff like that. And the same goes with a lot of other language concepts. So this was a very, very, very big deal for us to make sure that this library is doing, and that a lot of other widget libraries didn't do. And that was very important. And again, the thinking is that we have a lot of developers that want to do quick things that might not be super aware or experts in all of those things, whether it is events or internationalization or whatever. And we wanted to make sure that they can take those buttons, take those widgets, take whatever, create a really powerful interface with that also fits the standards of the foundation in terms of what we want to give people in terms of internationalization. So, all right, so with no further ado, that was a little bit of an explanation. So we went over what is OOUI, we went over the history, and we went over what is the principles that it's based off of. And now we can kind of delve into basic usage, which is introducing a little bit of the widget. So I created a little demo, and as befitting live demos, I hope it won't crash. But I created a little two widgets. We're going to look into one and then another. I will leave it up online so that after the lecture, if you want to take a look at it and play around with it, you can absolutely feel free. But let's take a look. And this is kind of an introduction. So the first one, here is my basic widget. We're going to go over it in a minute, but just for this demo, I took over special blank page. So I'm just going to turn that on. And turn on, the console. All right, but before we go and look at that, all I did, after loading OOUI modules and after verifying that I only do that for a special black page, very quickly, just so that I can demo. After I do that, all I did was, in the content of that page, I attached two widgets. So I just started, I initialized a button widget with a label OOUI button widget. And then I initialized a text input widget with a placeholder OOUI text input widget. And I appended both of those to the content area of that page. So remember we talked about the widget, the componentization. So the widget itself is widget button, but what I attach to the DOM is the dot element of that, right? And I write this here so that people won't completely kill me for polluting our global variables, which you should not do. But for this demo purpose only, I am exposing it in the global variables just so that we can talk to it a little bit in the console. So I know I shouldn't be doing that. Don't yell at me too much. It is a gadget that I use for this. Anyways, OK, so as you can see, I have the button widget with the label button widget. It is clickable. And I have an input. An input. Great. So I have two widgets. And I can see here that if I go to OOUI demo, I have button and I have text input. Cool. Well, what I can do with this is, for example, let's take our button, right? And let's change its label. So let's set the label to click me. And as you can see, I kind of practiced this before, so it somewhat completes my code. Click me. Yay, it changed to click me. Do I need to make it larger? Oops. Here. Let me make this a little larger. All right. Click me. Yay. All right. What else can I do? Well, we can also listen to events. So if I do OOUI demo button, I'm going to listen to on click. And I'm going to tell it when I click, I want to see some alert telling me I was clicked. Oops. And now, of course, I need to make sure that I close all my brackets in a live demo. All right, I'm here, and then please work. Yay! It's working. All right, so it listens to events. OK, well, what can we do? Well, first of all, because I'm going to keep on playing with it, the first thing I'm going to do, just so that they don't forget, is turn off that event, because we're going to listen to it again in a minute. And I don't want to create a stack of events. But now let's see what can we do with the label. Well, I have the text label. text input. Sorry, with the input, not the label. First of all, I can get its value, which is nothing right now. Well, OK, how about I set its value? OK, set value to foo, because that's what we usually set it to. There we go. It's foo. And I can do really cool stuff like, you know what? I want everything. So I'm going to do set validation. And validation is a function that takes whatever you give the input and returns whether it's valid or not. So I'm going to do something super simple, like it's only valid if I type good. And let's see. Well, I click here. First of all, foo, you can see it's red. It's invalid. If I start saying good, boom, it's valid. There you go. OK, so things are working. What else? I have like a little cheat sheet. Oh, I can change the flag. So a button has flags, and the flags doesn't kind of dictate what its meaning is, which also means what it looks like. So if I take the button and I say set flags, whoops, yes, set flags, and I can give it an object, and I can say, all right, primary true and progressive true. Boom, it is now primary progressive. Another thing I can do is I want that input that I just did, MWOUI demo, text input. How about we set an icon on it? Search. Maybe it's a search thing. And this, if you take a look at that input, you can see that not only is the icon on, but where you type moved. And this is what I was kind of talking about before about abstracting things for you. So you didn't need to add the icon and then figure out where it goes, and then maybe in zooming level it changes. We did that for you. You just add the icon. It's in there. You can change the icon in the middle. You can do whatever you want. We set that up for you. And now let me do something. I'm going to tempt my luck. Let's create something nice here. OK, so I'm creating a counter. And I'm going to create another widget. And I'm going to use an OOUI tag multi-select widget. Tag multi-select widget is this widget that allows you to add things with little pills, right? And I'm going to have it allow arbitrary, so I can add whatever I want in there. Otherwise, that widget takes values from existing values. So I'm going to allow it to add like whatever we want. All right. So I did that. OK, I have a widget in memory now. Well, the next phase would be to include it in the DOM. So content text, I think, append. And then it's not the widget. Remember, I append the element. The element is a representation of the widget. So I append the widget. Boom, I have something here. And it looks like it's just an input, but that's because that's the initial state of that widget. If I start going with 1, 2, the widget works. So it's here. And that's great. OK, well, next, let's do something nice. How about we go to the button, and we say that on click, we want to have the widget that I just created add a tag with a number on it. Counter. I hope I closed all my thing. OK. All right, so on click, right, you can see it here. On click, I'm going to call the widget I created to add a tag with that counter. Now, the point of this demo is to show that widgets can also listen to other widgets, right? Like we need them to communicate with one another. Sometimes I can get that reference in, and there we go. I can create a bunch of lovely tags. I don't know how useful that is, but it does work. All right. So this is kind of a demo of how base widgets work, and you can find those widgets if you go to doc.wikimedia.org, and then you have a section about OOUI, and you have demos in the JavaScript. You can also change it to the PHP demos. But in this demos, you can kind of see all the base widgets that we offer with kind of like some of the some of the configuration options. So you can have like the button I was talking about flags. You have the button primary and progressive. What happens if it's destructive, primary and destructive? You can kind of see like what they mean. You can play around with them. Towards the bottom, there are a little bit more complex widgets, but there's still widgets that come out of the box from OOUI. So you can see the widget that I was using, the tag, how about I look for a tag multi-select widget, is here, and you can play around with it. And there's like a menu version of it and stuff like that. So you can play around, see what you need, play around with different configuration options, and then figure out what you want to use. But these are all out-of-the-box widgets from OOUI. It's not working. I'm sorry. All right, so you can, I will go back to this page later because we have other things that we offer with this. You could, I want to show code, but we're going to fix it up. But what you could do in this, by the way, which is very, 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 very powerful, I created the gadget to be able to kind of play around with it, but you can actually play around with it in the demos. So basically, there's a tiny little arrow here that says toggle console. You can open that under any of those widgets. And then the reference to the widget you're looking at is widget, right? So if I say here, widget set label foo, whoops, it changes. So you can also play around with that in the demos, which is super powerful. So you don't have to create this gadget for yourself in order to be able to play around. All right, so that was basic widgets. Now let's see about custom widgets. So we kind of I showed how we have 2 widgets and then 3 widgets, and they talk to one another, and how can we make sure that they are linked and all that kind of stuff. Well, sometimes you will need a widget that doesn't exist yet, and you can create your own. And that can also mean something that you embed later in a pop-up, or you can use maybe multiple times in your interface, depending on where the user clicks it, or even just to make sure that you are componentizing and abstracting your own work. So I created another example, and again, all of this will remain online that you can examine, but I created another example in this link. And this one is a little bit, I wouldn't say it's complex, but it's a little bit more elaborate. So in here, I'm creating a custom widget. And I'm going to show you, before I'm going to the code, I'm just going to show you that it's here. I'm going to make it a little bigger. Can I make it a little bigger? Hello? Yes. All right. So I'll make it a little smaller. All right. So there's a little button here, custom widget demo, that when you opens up a pop-up that has what does OOUI stand for, and then an input and button. So this, what does OOUI stand for? The inside is my custom widget. So we can look at the code a little bit and go over it. So I'm starting out with an object here. This is my class that will be my new widget. And it extends the base widget. So it just extends widget, OK, OOUI widget. And we call the parent. That's what we always do. We set up the config. And then really, I'm starting to build it. So I have the pieces here as title widget, which is what you saw. It's kind of like, what is blah, 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 my question. I have a notice widget. So the notice widget comes to be when if I open this and I give, for example, no answer, and it says, give me something, give me anything. That is kind of a notice, right? But it's hidden sometimes. It's hidden when it has nothing. But I still need to give it a room in the DOM. So I create it, a notice widget. And then I have the input, and I have the button. So I basically just created those widgets. I added classes to them so that we could style them later. But they are straightforward widgets. The button has a label. The input has a placeholder. And then the other widgets, I didn't initialize them with the value because it depends. The value comes from the config. And how do we do that? Well, we attach it first to the DOM. So this time, we don't attach it to the DOM of the page. We attach it to the DOM of the element. So every time you extend OOUI widget, you have a this.element, and you can append to it. And that will be the constraint of your widget. And then you append to it title, notice, in order, right? Title, element, notice, element, and then input and button. Please ignore the CSS here. It's just because this is a gadget, and I did not want to start messing around with including CSS files. So this is just to make sure that it doesn't completely look bad. And then we want to connect to events. Well, I want to do something when I click the button. So I connect the button to its click event, and I tell it to call this method. But also the input, you might click enter on it. Well, the input abstracted for me the action enter. So I just listen to that and call the same method. And then I just initialize it. So I basically set up this widget with the option of giving me a question and a series of answers. So I'm setting it up in the beginning. And then, of course, I'm setting up all my methods. So this is what will answer the event on button click. So very, very briefly, again, you can take a deeper look at this later if you want to. But very briefly, if I have nothing, it will tell the user, give me something, give me anything. When you do it, please remember internationalization. This is just for a demo. If I'm checking if the answer is valid. If it's valid, I'm setting it as valid. The notice will say correct. The button will be disabled. And I'm going to emit a success event with the answer I was given. If it's not valid, then I'm going to say wrong, try again, and I'm going to emit failure. And either way, I'm going to erase the value of the input. All right, so this is what happens when I either click the button or press enter. And then this is my way of checking if the answer is valid. It's just we're assuming that the user gave us an array of answers, and then we're checking whether it's in the array. Setting the notice. This is another way to kind of like show how you abstract things. Set notice will not just be setting the label. We want to set the label. We want to toggle it to be visible. And maybe I want a class to say, you know what, my widget has this state now that it has a notice, because maybe I want the CSS to also have conditional stuff on it. So you can do that. And then set new question. I'm getting question, getting answers, and I'm just setting things in. I'm saying, OK, here's my answer options. I'm going to change my title widget to have the label of the answer. And then I'm going to reset stuff here and emit reset. So this is the way that it kind of works. So let's go up and check. So it's asking me, give me anything. So if I say, I don't know, well, that's not a valid answer. So I'm wrong. Try again. And if you notice, my background became red. We're going to touch on why that happened in a second. I'll show you. And then if I say object-oriented JavaScript, well, that's correct. I get correct. So the widget changed itself. And then I get an alert, and my background changed. But in the code that I showed you, there was no alert. There was no background change. There was only an event, which is my next step to show. So after I did all of that and I defined my widget, now I needed to append it somewhere. So I'm starting it up, and I'm starting it out with some question. What does OOUI stand for? And some answers, so object-oriented JavaScript or in object-oriented JS. Right? Both of those will be valid. And then I just took a simple pop-up button widget, gave it a label and a title. And then in its pop-up, I said, in the content area of the pop-up, I put my widget. Right? Remember, my widget element, because that is the DOM. And I gave it a padding. And then the pop-up, which is what I want to kind of like include, was included in the actual DOM. Not the best location, but you know, it's a demo. So. But here's the second thing that I was doing. So this is kind of like, you know, this allowed me to look at it in the DOM and play around with it and have it included in the pop-up. But the reason why things worked with, you know, the background here is actually this. This is the events, right? So I have my personal widget, my personalized widget, my custom widget, that I'm saying on success. Now, whoever's doing this space, they don't necessarily care what it means, like how the widget works to define what success means. They just say, I have this question widget that I want to know if it's successful or not. Right? So on success, you change the body color and you put an alert. On fail, you do something else. And on reset, you reset the color. This allows you to do things in an abstract way and answer kind of widgets in you know, separate your code in a logical way. Like you have how do things are defined as success, how do I validate stuff that's inside that widget. It's self-sustained. Other people may be able to use it, but even if not, I can use it in my code with a very clear separation where either you know, anything else, you know, in this case, just my general initialization listens to that. But it could be another widget that listens to that. It could be you know, a gadget that listens. Anything like that. So this kind of shows the separation of stuff. And I've exposed, let's see, I've exposed that widget again. Oops. What did I call it? I'm sorry. MW. I was very bad at exposing things into the global. But I exposed it so that we can call it in the console. So if I have it here, it's correct. And I say, all right, well, W, da, da, da. Set new question. Yeah, I already tested it out. How are you today? And I'm going to accept awesome and great. And okay, so I'm calling this from outside the widget, from the console in this case. Awesome and great. Boom, it reset itself, right? Because that's what I told it to do. I abstracted things out. It just reset it for me. Let's see what happens if I say meh. Nope, you're wrong. You do not feel meh. Give me another answer. All right, well, great. Yay! That was correct. Great, good answer. All righty. So we kind of went over this a little quickly. I hope that it was sufficiently kind of explained. I will have time for questions, so we can go back into that. But that is basically custom widgets. So this is you making a Lego, making kind of like your own widget by using other widgets and connecting them together. And we have a lot of those examples also in some of the code. And we have a tutorial for that in the OOUI tutorials now. So you can also follow that. All right. So in this case, exactly, I have a question widget. It emits success or fail. And then the pop-up widget or anything else can just listen to that, not really mind what the widget is doing, whether it's fixing things for itself, and just answer that. All right, are you guys ready? I am getting into advanced usage. This was an advanced, no, I'm just kidding. This was pretty advanced usage, but what I'm going to get into is a little bit more logical advanced usage because of things that we kind of see when people try to use OOUI with really complex products. So I'm going to give an example of a complex product, which is the recent changes filters. So the recent changes filters, one of the things that happen is this is all OOUI, and there are custom widgets in there, of course. But there are also, you might recognize some of the base widgets. So the tag multi-select widget is a base widget. It was just adjusted a little bit. There are button widgets there. There are pop-up widgets. So everything is kind of based on existing widgets, that we kind of toggled. But the main thing about it is that everything has to listen to everything else. So I don't know how many of you actually use this on a regular basis, but the saved filters is kind of like this menu where you can store a set of filters for you. So the save filters kind of listens to this button to save the current filter. But also the button listens to it because it needs to know, should I appear or not? Because if I am displaying right now an existing self-filter, a saved filter, I shouldn't appear. So it needs to know the state of that. And then the pills, the tags, need to know the state of what happens to the pop-up, right? And the pop-up needs to know what happened to the tags. And we have a switcher of namespaces and tags. Well, the input needs to know what's going on because it adds a prefix for you. But also the pop-up everything just needs to know what everything else is doing. And one of the things that I see sometimes in some of the products is that people then try to implement everything inside the widgets. So, which is not a bad idea, and I did that in the demos when you're talking about a relatively small project, kind of like a relatively self-contained small widget that you might want to reuse or something that has its own intent and it's relatively small, just like you saw the question widget. But with something as big as this that needs to really know, everything needs to know the state, you might want to consider using a model. Which is what we did for recent changes filters. So we have a controller and a model, and then we, we make sure that the widgets call the action on the controller. We have everything normalized. The controller will change the model, and all the widgets just listen to one single model, and the model emits a change event, and then the widgets just say, oh, it changed, I'll adjust myself. And you end up having one single source of truth instead of all widgets kind of, oh no, I forgot that this widget needs the other 4 widgets to listen to. And you need to start delivering all widgets to one another. Now you just give the controller and model to everything, and you have a very organized thing. So widgets don't need to know about the other widgets. They are very self-contained. It simplifies your code. It makes your life a lot easier when you need to go back and fix bugs. Trust me, because that happens. All right, so this is kind of just a shift in thinking, and this is something that we're kind of planning to check into, maybe using that in OOUI base in some of our advanced widgets as well to give you more powerful stuff. All right, we're getting close to the end here. So here are some resources that you can use, and you should be, again, this will be shared, and you can bookmark all of this. So first of all, we are going towards the road for version 1. Right now we are 0.32, 32, 33, 1.32. Sorry, I lost. I'm having signals here. 1.32, 0.32. Thank you. Okay. Anyways, we are. I can't read signs apparently. Anyways, we are going towards the road for version 1. And there's a ticket for that. If you have anything to contribute, if you think that there's something needs to happen before we go to version 1, we really, really need your input. And we could really use help on that and more eyes. There's the fabricator board. So if you have anything you run into from either, of course, if there's bugs, if there's something that you're using a widget and you think that it shouldn't be doing that, please submit a ticket. But also, if you want to see more things in OUI, if you're missing something, if you're saying, I am missing a widget, or this widget is good, but it's missing this functionality, this is really useful for us. Because then we can come in and say, OK, there's a very clear functionality that we need to go, rather than try to make sure that everything is generic enough without having a very clear use case. So if you have those, please tag tasks with OUI tag. And then we have the documentation. So we have the demos that I kind of showed briefly, but you can go in there. There's, I think, all of the base widgets are there with various combinations of configuration. And then we have the code documentation. We actually put a lot of effort into the code documentation. It's a really, really good general documentation that has a lot of examples in it. So we have the PHP one and the JavaScript one. And fairly recently this year, tutorials were added in. And we're thinking of expanding those as well. So right now we have 2 tutorials about making a to-do list. The first tutorial is basically using base OUI widgets, and the second one is extending them and going through it step by step. And you're very much encouraged to use those. And again, if you have any ideas or any comments about more tutorials or something to do with the current tutorials, please let us know. You can tag Fabricator tickets with OUI, or you can go to Wikimedia editing in IRC, where we lurk and wait for OUI ideas and bugs. And with that, thank you. And let's see if there are any questions.
Hi, everybody. This is Sarah as well. Just to let you know that I am also lurking and waiting on IRC and on the YouTube stream. We do have a few questions from the IRC channel. Moriel, would you like me to ask those, or do you have ones in the room?
No, go ahead.
OK. So, and if I miss a question, please feel free to go ahead and ping me on this IRC channel. I'll look for it. So we have a question for you, Moriel. What are some of the best, cleanest examples of OOUI usage in, I think that's in product, that we should consider exemplary?
That's an interesting question. So I can probably find, off the top of my head, it's a little hard. I need to just take a look again. Because one of the things that happened to all software engineers is that even when you think something is clean, within 3 to 4 months, you realize that you made a lot of mistakes you wish you didn't, and then it's no longer clean. So I can give you a couple of products that I think we did well for its time. But if you want me to find really a good example right now of something very clean, I'll need to take a look at it. So I will say that off the top of my head, I will say RC filters is pretty good example. We took a lot of effort into separating all the logic. That does mean that in some cases we on purpose shut down some of the widget events because we wanted the model to do that. But overall, I would say it's a good example for what OUI can do. It's a very clean. I wouldn't say it's very simple, though. Like, it is a very kind of like a rather complex product. So I don't know if I would say as beginners it would be very easy to read it. But maybe go over it a little bit. There's definitely, especially with the MVC kind of plan. Other products, I'm going to need to take a look. I'll get back to people. Oh, notifications. What? I'm sorry? Which?
From a user experience point of view, content translation version 2.
Okay.
Gives a very nice way of how things can work in a visual.
Okay, I'll repeat the question because you do not have a mic, although I have a mic here. Volker points out that content translation 2, from a user perspective, is very good on how to use OOUI. From a UX perspective, is very good. And then we also have notifications. Both the pop-up, I would say, and the page are maybe good examples. We also have a lot of separation of concerns there and kind of like individual widgets. And I will just need to take a look and see about other, maybe simpler products. But these are the ones that come to mind. Incidentally, they're the ones that are also worked on. So that might be why they're coming to mind. But yes, I hope that answers the question a little bit.
One of the things that we can do too after the talk is over is we do document the talks on a page on MediaWiki, and we can put links to some of these things there to support this talk after.
Sure.
So we have another question, IRC. We actually have a few or a couple. The next question is, does OOUI, my screen just moved. Does OOUI have dependencies on the MediaWiki ecosystem, or is it easy to use elsewhere?
You can use it elsewhere. I have a project that uses it elsewhere, and we have actually in Community Tech we have a project that uses it elsewhere. I would say that it depends what you need to do, right? Like OOUI was a very specific answer to our use cases. To the level of internationalization that we need, to the level of the fact that we have gadget people that write gadgets and stuff like that. It might not be the answer to everything that you need in your private project. And it is not competing against, these kind of libraries. On the flip side, it does give you a lot of power in terms of an existing widget. You don't need to think about, boom, inside the DOM. And if you do want to use it, OOUI is a composer package and an NPM package. And you can include it in your project, and it's fairly easy, and you just, you add it in, and there are documentation about that. In fact, in the tutorial assumes that you are outside of MediaWiki. So the tutorial kind of like guides you through, your own demo page that's just blank HTML. So you can kind of go over that and see what is required.
And also, just as a note, folks have been adding links to the IRC chat. So if people are looking for those, they can check in the IRC chat. And I will also put those on the page for this talk afterward.
Awesome.
For our next question, it's related. It's how many products currently use OOUI and how many don't but could?
Ooh, I actually am not sure about that. I know that there is, so all new products should be using OOUI now. I mean, a lot of the recent efforts to make sure that it's, especially with the accessibility now and everything like that. And we have done a very, very big project to convert a lot of the existing things, and I think we're almost done with that. How many of them? Volker, do you have any idea? Microphone, please.
First off, what products are we talking about? Are we talking about Wikimedia Foundation products or products in the wild? We have it in use in basically all major products besides mobile frontend, and mobile frontend has done some work on the preferences pages and comes now with advanced mobile contributions, and I think we don't have a discrete number, but this is something that we gonna put on our documentation as well, because it gives a better insight on how successful it is used in the wild, actually.
Yeah.
So I can't pinpoint it to 12, 13, 14, or 23, but it is a lot.
Okay.
As well.
All right, we can add that as a follow-up as well.
Okay, it looks like I don't have any other questions on IRC. I don't see any on the YouTube stream either, but we might want to give one extra minute for that. And if there are questions in the room, people feel free to ask.
I'm just really excited that my demo widgets didn't have bugs in them. I don't know. I mean, This is like, I think, miraculous. It was a live demo. Any questions in the room?
I do have a question on the YouTube stream.
Go
I
ahead.
think it's a question. It just says, any thoughts on web components, on OOUI web components? So I don't know if that's really a question or just kind of some comments.
Can you repeat the question?
Any thoughts on OOUI web components?
Volker, the planner of OOUI.
Well, so this has been a topic that has been floating around for several years. Currently, we are not having concrete plans in this direction, just because we had a lot to do with bringing the current library to all the products, and again, it's a resources thing first and foremost. Web components, on the other hand, were got a little bit hyped, and then saw some technical obstacles in the standards development. But we are following what's out there and following the development, and we will pick this up as soon as we see it viable as a useful addition. How to encapsulate OOUI and just provide a more simple API. There has been some work by people like Bartosz to bring things like MWOUI button to the core, but again, this is a longer discussion that we are inviting you, whoever brought that question up, to join and discuss with us.
Yeah, and you can see a lot of those questions on the board, on the OOUI board. We have a couple of tickets that are a little bit longer term. OOUI does have resourcing, very, very low resourcing right now. So a lot of us that support OOUI core do it kind of outside of the regular job that we're doing. And Volker is 100% on it. But there's resource constraints. So we do have to kind of prioritize kind of things. And this is where you, the listeners and participants, can help us, because if we know that there's a need, that will really, really help us out, prioritize, and know that, because there's a lot of things that we want to do with the library. There's a lot of things that we need to do with the library that bring it back, a little bit forward from 2011 to here, although there's a lot of things that are modern. But still, there are things that, we want to change. And knowing which one is the next thing would kind of also depend on use cases and ideas and people who want to participate. So please, use the board, use the IRC chat. Do you want to talk about the front end group, if anyone wants to join?
I wanted to add thank you for bringing up the road to OOUI 1.0. This is our biggest priority right now. And additionally, there is also a group within the Wikimedia Foundation, from the Developers Standards Group, where we discuss things like standardizing our efforts, standardizing and sharing our efforts across the foundation, where OOUI plays a big part. So if you're interested, please hit me up, Volker at wikimedia.org, and I'm gonna invite you for this group.
All right. Was that the last question, or?
Yeah, the last question came from the YouTube stream. So if there's a clarifying question, I just want to leave it open for a little bit so that the person who asked is able to ask. And then I don't.
So that might be a good time, because I forgot to mention this, and we will probably put it up in the documentation of the talk. But you can reach me as Muipu on IRC for any questions that you have, and Wikimedia-editing on IRC is where we lurk and talk OOUI. So even if you have follow-up questions and you want to know more and stuff like that, this is a good place to kind of be, asking those questions and getting me and other people to answer.
Also, just a quick note, because I did type the person's name wrong in the YouTube chat. I'm juggling between a ton of different windows, so I might make some typos when I'm chatting with people. So just so you know, I'm sorry if I mess up your name.
All right. Yeah, it looks like we're good. So thank you very much.